Hey, what's up everyone, Ollie here. So, how to build your own Shopify store for beginners. I have a lot of notes here that I want to go through. I just want to make sure I cover everything. Yeah, this is probably one of the most common questions I get in the comments, in my inbox, especially since I've done a few videos and mentioned here and there that I have my own Shopify store that generates over $1 million a year, or has generated over $1 million in the last year. If you haven't seen that video, make sure to check it out. It is on my channel. I also want to give you guys a quick reminder that I do have a newsletter. Please sign up to it. There's a link to it in the description, free and everything. You know, all I do is I send out an email a month, one email a month, mainly because I just don't want to flood your inboxes with rubbish. So yeah, one email a month where I share things that I've learned. I share cool things that I found on the internet and sort of links to things that I found interesting over the last month. So check it out if you guys are interested. So building your own Shopify business. The first thing you should do is build a brand. So before you do anything, you should come up with a brand name. Now, you don't have to overthink it. Don't overthink it. Don't feel like you have to spend lots of money coming up with a brand or anything like that. Just come up with something simple. So some of my rules when it comes to coming up with a brand name, come up with something simple that sort of rolls off the tongue. Don't come up with something that's very complicated, just simple. I like to put two words together and make it into a brand. So for example, with my main sort of YouTube channel and my Twitter handle and stuff, you guys may have noticed that I have ultra links. It's literally just ultra and then links put together, and I've just come up with the brand right there and then. So yeah, just simple, come up with two words that maybe you like, put them together and make a brand. I mean, a good example is actually Daniel Wellington, the watch brand Daniel Wellington. The founder of Daniel Wellington, his name isn't even Daniel Wellington. He just liked the two names Daniel and Wellington and then put them together and came up with a brand. So yeah, just don't overthink it. Use a service like Name Checker to see if the domain is available, and you can also see if the social channels are available, like the Twitter, the Instagram, all that sort of stuff. Free to use. And again, do not spend silly money on a domain. Don't spend like $1,000 on like some special domain. It's just not worth it, especially when you're starting out. Most domains can be found for like $10, $20. So yeah, don't spend silly money on a domain unless you already have a business and you're very much after a specific name. But yeah, other than that, just don't spend money on a silly domain. When coming up with a logo, just choose a simple text logo. Don't worry about having a sort of icon or anything like that. That's something you can add later on down the line. I think at the beginning, it's more important just to have a text logo, because if you come up with an icon and then you put that icon on things and you don't have your text logo, people aren't going to know what your brand is. Like, they're not going to know what it is. They're not going to know where it's from, especially if you're very much new to the game. The only people I feel like that you're going to recognize when it comes to like an icon is like McDonald's or Tesla or Apple, you know, because they're just so big. But most other companies, so much better off with just having a text logo. When it comes to the platform, of course, you've got to choose Shopify. Like, Shopify is by far and away the best platform right now. It's the one I recommend to everyone. The great thing about Shopify is that it's a very scalable service, very scalable platform. You can start as a very small business, someone who's just making maybe a few $1,000s a year, to someone who's making millions a year, all on one platform. That's what Shopify does so well, and it's why I always recommend it. Same with the plugin sort of marketplace and the theme marketplace. If there's something that you want to do with your Shopify store that you don't know how to do, you're most likely going to be able to find a plugin that does it for you. You know, it's just one of the best platforms for plugins. I use so many plugins for my Shopify store. I'm always testing out and trying out different plugins as well. There's just so much to choose from, and it's well worth having a look. When it comes to choosing a theme for your store, choose one of the free themes that Shopify already has available. Don't feel like you have to spend money on a theme yet, not until you've started making a bit more money, especially because the free themes have already been optimized to work really well with Shopify. They're already optimized to convert pretty well, and they cater to most stores. I think a lot of people sort of get hung up on making a really fancy looking website and stuff. Don't worry about all that sort of stuff. Worry about having good products. Worry about having good photography of your products, because the photography and the videos of your products are what's going to sell them. Not how fancy your website is, not what fancy fonts and stuff you use. It's all about making the most simple website that can show a customer what the product is, what the product does, and so that it can convert them to actually purchase the product as simple as possible. Choosing a product to sell. So I think this is actually probably one of the toughest parts. Most people think they can just start like a merch store, where they have t-shirts and hoodies and stuff and they can make millions of dollars. And I'll be honest, that's just not going to happen. Not unless you have a massive following online and they care about having your brand or your face on them, because it just doesn't make sense, I don't think. Like, the only people that can do something like that are, the big YouTubers and the big celebrities and stuff. But, when you're someone like me or just like another sort of just person who doesn't have a massive following, you have to come up with something else. I'd recommend having a look at a product that you already have and then seeing what you can do to sort of update that product, what changes you would make to that product, what you don't like about that product. These are the sorts of things where I think it makes the most sense when it comes to choosing a product. Don't feel like you have to come up with something completely original that's never been done before. It can just be a bag or backpack or something like that. That's how I started. There was a bag that I liked, but there were some things that I wanted to change. So I thought, hey, let's see if I can find a supplier to sort of take this existing design with my changes and stuff and see what they can do. And that's what they did. So don't worry about having to come up with something original. Like I said, just choose a product that you yourself would be passionate about, something that you would be happy to sell to other people. And that's what you should come up with. You should sketch out your product. It can just be on pen and paper. Don't worry about having to use any fancy programs or anything. It can just be on pen and paper. Maybe put some measurements down of the product. Maybe put down the materials, what you'd like for it to be made out of, whether it's something like leather or nylon when it comes to like a backpack or something. Those are the sorts of things you need to think about when it comes to making your products, because it's the sort of thing you're going to be sending off to a supplier. Finding a manufacturer. So now that you have a sketch of a product, it's time to find a supplier. Alibaba.com is a place to start if you're looking for an Asian manufacturer. It's what I use to find manufacturers for my products. You can put in an RFQ, which stands for Request for Quotation. This is when you share your product sketch and specifications so that potential suppliers can message you back. Some factors I use to narrow down a manufacturer is the quality of their English. I'm sure there are many suppliers who are great, but unfortunately, if there's a language barrier, it's going to make it difficult to communicate with them and tell them what you want, and for them to tell you what they think you should do. You should also see their portfolio to make sure that they've made other similar products, because if you're making, for example, like I said, like a backpack, you want to make sure that the supplier you're working with has made other backpacks in the past. I recommend talking to around 5 different suppliers, ordering samples from each, and you'll easily be able to tell which ones are good by just the communication and how good the samples are. When placing an order, make sure to pay via Alibaba and use a credit card if you can, mainly because if something goes wrong, you're protected. And trust me, this is something I've learned from myself. I ordered a bunch of products from a supplier. The sample was great, but then once I actually got the batch of products, they weren't up to scratch. They weren't sort of good enough for me to sell. So I went back to the supplier and was like, hey, these aren't good enough, can I get a refund? And they just refused. They just came up with all sorts of excuses, and it cost me around $10,000. And this was early on when I first started, when I didn't really know what I was doing. So that was a costly mistake for me. Luckily, I could afford to make that mistake, but I know a lot of people can't afford to make that mistake. So make sure to sort of protect yourself. Make sure to check the samples, make sure to check the products and stuff. And when you're paying for products and stuff, like I said, use a credit card, then you can protect yourself. Shipping. So I personally like to get the batch of products delivered to myself, so that then I can check each and every product before it's sent out to customers. It's a much better way to make sure that the quality is up to scratch and that no defects are sent out to customers. I actually recommend shipping everything yourself at the beginning. It's just cheaper and easier. Once you start getting a regular amount of orders, maybe a couple of hundred orders a month or whatever, that's when you start using a third-party fulfillment center, using drop shipping and things like that. I know drop shipping gets like a bad sort of rep, and it's just because there's so many bad drop shippers out there. It's sort of being used and abused. But when drop shipping is done right and you have a good product, it can actually be a really good way to ship your products out to customers. There's also no such thing as free shipping. I feel like Amazon and other sort of online retailers have spoiled us with free shipping. So what I do is I actually just roll up the shipping cost into the product itself, the product cost, the product price, because customers don't like the idea of paying for shipping. So even if it makes the product more expensive, and if it makes it more expensive than the competition, I think it's just more important offering free shipping, because it's just another barrier that's not there for the customer. Keep improving your products. So once you've sold your first batch of products, what I like to do is I like to make updates and changes to every batch after that, so that over time I sort of perfect the product, so that over time the product gets better until we're at a point where we can't really do anything else. This is a really good way just to make sure that your products are getting better, because you're not going to get it perfect on the first go. That just doesn't happen. I'll be honest with you. So don't feel like your product has to be absolutely perfect before you start selling it. You know, as long as it's like good enough at the beginning, especially when you're first starting out, I think that's more important rather than perfecting the product straight away. So yeah, keep improving them as you get more and more orders, as you order more and more stock. That's the best way to sort of up the quality of your products. Marketing. So I think this is, again, a tough one because it differs so much from product to product, service to service, and just what you're selling. It's definitely one of the most important aspects for any business, because what's the point of making great products if no one can find them, if no one can see them? That's where marketing has to come into play. I recommend trying every single form of marketing you can and seeing what works for you. You can try things like Facebook and Instagram ads, Google ads, influencer marketing, email marketing, and giveaways. For me personally, Facebook and Instagram ads and influencer marketing has worked the best. I think it's just for the products that I have for your store. Those sorts of marketing work well. Google ads and email marketing are really, really good ways to market your products as well, especially email marketing, because email marketing is, I think, one of the most valuable ways, one of the best ways to market your products. But obviously, at the beginning, you're most likely not going to have an email list. It's something that you build over time. So as you get more and more customers, and as you get their emails and their phone numbers and stuff, you can start emailing them about new products that you've launched or whatever else, because they've purchased from you in the past. They're most likely going to purchase again in the future. A few other things I want to touch on is that don't try to be cheaper than the rest, mainly because I think it's actually more beneficial to make a sort of good quality premium product rather than having to make a really cheap product, because places like Amazon and eBay are just going to beat you when it comes to cheaper products. So think about making a good quality product for a good price. Don't think about trying to make the cheapest product as possible. Choose something simple. Don't feel like you have to make a very complicated product, because even something like a wireless charger can be very, very expensive to make, mainly because a manufacturer will need to make the tooling and the machinery to make a wireless charger, unless they have like one that's already designed and you put your logo on. But if you want a custom one, you could be spending like $20, $30, $40, $50,000, something ridiculous, just to get the machinery and the tooling into place. So yeah, don't make anything too complicated. Start with something simple. Use a third party to check your orders. So when you've made an order from a Chinese manufacturer, there are actually a bunch of third party sort of inspection companies that are out there as well. You pay them maybe $100, $200, sometimes maybe $300, and they'll go out and they'll inspect the products before they actually get shipped out to you and before you make the final payment. A great way to sort of just see pictures of the products, for the inspector to check the materials and things like that. Just another way to protect yourself so that you haven't spent a ton of money on products that you don't want. So those are just some of the tips that I recommend to anyone who's starting their own Shopify business. It's just things that I've learned over the years from having my own business. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe to my newsletter, follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and subscribe for more.